Bonjour, non. Bienvenue à nouveau. Très heureux de vous accueillir pour cet après-midi qui démarre.
Welcome to this afternoon session. Just a bit of news.
Pour vous informer qu'on était...
To inform you that we have been classified in the top 10 of the best tweets this morning. Please applaud. So we were on the top 10 of one of the 10 best tweets this morning. Thank you, Elliot, for this amazing work. Our third session is dedicated to another topic. As I told you, we wanted to be cross, which means to tackle various topics. We're going to talk now about digital writing. Is there a revolution going on? In order to discuss this topic, we have Arnaud Dressen, who's been founder of Honkytonk, Séverine Girbal is CEO of Fannie, Marta Gomes, coming from Portugal, is a writer and a producer at BeActive, and Alexander Knetig is an interactive commissioning editor for the channel ARTE. The moderation is ensured by Nicolas from Vallée. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this debate dedicated to digital writing. This is a debate, so please feel free to ask questions. If you feel eager to during the debate, at the end of the presentations, we'll also have a Q&A session. Thank you very much for being so punctual today. It's 3 o'clock. It's the time when everybody falls asleep. We'll try to stimulate your attention during this debate, and before each of the participants is introducing him or herself to the audience, I'd like to tell us about the issues we want to discuss. We need to be very precise, because when we talk about digital storytelling, we sometimes talk about concepts, and I'd like us to mention practical projects and examples of achievements, of difficulties and assets that you've been experiencing. It is very a good opportunity, because all our panelists are field workers who have been carrying out projects and digital projects. I'll ask each of you to introduce him and herself, as well as his or her company, and then choose one project that seems particularly representative for digital storytelling, and why this project couldn't have been existing before before digital media, and how digital media enabled their project to happen. My reference project is Citizen Kane, but it is not a digital project. So I'd like you to tell about one project you've been carrying out and that is representative and that well illustrates this topic.
I'm Marta. I work at BeActive in Portugal, and we started as a cross-media production company, and our first project, which was the one that really presented itself as a really big challenge, was Sophia's Diary. What we wanted to do with Sophia's Diary, we wanted the audience to be able to decide what was going to happen in the story, to have a say in what was happening with the characters. So we started with a very simple website where Sophia would post her diary page telling what happened on that day, and at the end there was a dilemma. So a really simple thing like, tomorrow I have a test at school, should I stay home studying or should I go out with my boyfriend? So that was the kind of things that we wanted people to decide, because it's simple, it's something that teenagers face every day, and it's something that people can identify with. Then the problem was, how are we going to take care of this information? How are we going to develop this story? Because it started as a site, it was only text, but quickly people wanted more. They wanted to know what Sophia looked like, how her friends looked like. So we needed to put up a casting and decide what the characters were like. And in order to make the audience more participative and more interested in it, we did a poll on the internet asking them what Sophia would look like. Green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, big, small, whatever. So in 2 months we got Sophia and her friends, and it started being so big. It started being so big on the internet that we got an invitation from a publisher to publish books with Sophia's story. We only had a paragraph a day. We only had a dilemma a day. So how are we going to do, like 2 months, it's like 60 pages of a book. So we had to develop the rest of the story, the rest of the characters. And by the end of 2003, we published 3 books and we started developing the TV series. So in all of this, the audience could have a decision. They could send us emails, they could vote, they could give us their opinion on how the story would develop. The big challenge was how to make it interesting enough for people to keep watching, because it would be a TV show, it's something that it's supposed to be glamorous, it's something it's supposed to be different from your daily life, but also it was supposed to make people feel it was supposed to make people identify themselves with the characters, so they had to be normal people like my friends from school. So it was a bit difficult to find the balance on the content and on the adventures that Sophia was going to live, because it still had to be glamorous and it still had to be normal and it still had to be believable. So that was the big challenge for us in terms of developing the story.
Merci. Moi, j'ai plein de questions sur le projet, mais on va y venir après.
Thank you very much. I've got many questions related to this project, and we, of course, are going to mention the difficulties and assets and achievements. Maybe I can qualify this project saying that it was a participatory book written on the internet.
Alors, Alexander,
what would you like to tell us about? My name is Alexander. I'm working at ARTE's web department, and I'm working on ARTE's internet productions. From the writing content as a program manager would do on television, for example, on the internet. This field did not exist a few times ago. At ARTE we have 2 kinds of productions. On the one hand, we coach our TV programs and we add content on the web. And the second part of our activities is essentially production. We started in 2008 producing web-born works. They may be broadcast on TV, but not necessarily. And since 2009, we've had a budget specifically allocated to this. We have the opportunity to produce interactive works that are not broadcast on ARTE TV afterwards. I had to choose between several projects. I thought I would mention President Vallée, but I guess you already know about this, and this is why I chose to mention Addict. This was our first web fiction. We started it in November 2010. The concept was very simple. There was a robbery in the city of Bordeaux in a suburbs house. One child disappeared. What happened? We had a series of 80 episodes that were broadcasted 1 month long, and we had to find the criminal, and we had to find back the child. So we wanted to really experience digital storytelling with that project. First of all, saying that video has to be short, because it corresponds to the internet standard for internet content. We need the content to be interactive and to be broadcast on the internet. This should not be an interactive DVD, but rather totally separate content available on the web. This is very easy for a documentary movie, but not that easy for fictional work. You see that web is reality and fiction is a closed environment related to a scenario. So what we thought was to work together with Mascaret Production and also Pierre Merle, who is not here in the audience now. We decided to work together and to have a fragmented storytelling, to work together with non-professional actors in this building in order to create participation. And this has proved very efficient beyond the main story, as it enabled us to generate profiles and a website in a big interactive augmented reality game. For example, one of the main characters has visited a medium. And this medium had an old website, an old HTML classical website, as you can see them in reality. And this third website was providing information about the plot, so that before the end of the first season, you had the opportunity via this website to know the outcome of the story. This is a real example of interactive narration, storytelling to us. We've been investing a lot and thinking a lot about the way we would write this story. But the audience was very low for this project because we wanted to target a very broad audience, and it was rather experimental. Therefore, I thought it was interesting to mention this project and discuss it with you. We are going to mention, as we did with Marta, the pros and cons of the project. So I would say this is an interactive storytelling and a content universe, because you saw that various kinds of information have been circulated over various media. Yes, that's exactly the point. We can use content and broadcast it over several platforms and using the codes and the formats of real life. Good morning, my name is Séverine Girbal. I founded the society Happy Fannie. We're a cross-media agency. We have specialized after 3 years in digital writing, which is very specific and requires specific writing for each media. We are expert in community animation and community building. We like to say that we carry out creative community management, because our community managers in fictional systems do then play the role of fictional characters as they would do in a role game. Therefore, we see that the writing has to be very specific, and our society, Happy Fannie, has been existing for 3 years. Our first project, the first project we produced, was related to a TV series that was called Supernatural Oddities. It was a video project, and we offered a platform with online challenges so that the surfers had the opportunity to take part in the story by producing themselves content in this fictional universe. So it was about supernatural words with field investigations about some angels, about some UFOs. And we asked the audience to produce content, texts and pictures matching with the series, in line with the series. So we got lots of content that has been geolocalized. The characters for the fiction for the TV part were also present on the social media, so that the audience had the opportunity to see the making up of the investigation, to get to know about the characters' life and to ask them questions, real-time questions. So we see that the border between fiction and reality was not that clear anymore, because the audience had the opportunity to talk to the characters as if they were doing it in their daily lives. The third aspect of the project was then entering reality. We produced an internet reality game, which was an alternate reality game, and Julien Aubert worked together with me on this project. I think he left the room now. We then encouraged the audience to further carry on those investigations that we had started, and we created an investigation on the place so that people could meet in a hotel and then in a park in order to carry out this investigation. The most committed viewers then came to attend this event and meet in their real life the fictional characters. We also carry out consulting work for Orange and other companies. This year we've been working together for literature interactive fiction. I have many things to say about this project because we just completed it. It was very interesting, as literature is a field that is at the origin of the internet, which means debating and producing text. That was a very fascinating experience. And I think with this project we even went further as regards the use of social media and interactive media, as the main character was exchanging via Twitter, and this tweeting experience lasts for 7 months. It was an opportunity for us to try several new options related to writing and with the readers, with the reader's voice, Alexandre Jardin. Thank you very much. It's difficult to qualify all these elements you mentioned. I think you have this very important element of interactive relationship to the audience. We have this storytelling that is being written together with the audience. The audience is writing the story. Arnaud, what is your point of view on this? I founded a company called Honkytonk Movies, and we've been working for 4 years on audiovisual writing on the internet. We produce programs that are only broadcast on the internet. From the very start, we thought that it would be interesting and important to work full-time on this field, to build teams that have a specific know-how or want to develop such a know-how. We know that there are particular skills on the internet as regards technology, art, organization, and other aspects. Our team encompasses 7 people. We have specialized in documentaries. We started 4 years ago, and one of our main projects is Travel to the End of Coal. The idea was to place the surfer at the center of the plot or storytelling. Mobile surfers are used to browse and to design their own navigation. So we wanted to we asked ourselves how we could use this investigation topic in a very extreme topic, that is the Chinese coal mines, and how we could use this context, this framework, this historical environment, in order to encourage the surfer to start its own browsing and navigation, that is, accessing to several levels of information and having his or her own experience that would last longer or shorter according to the program. That is, the experience might last 2 minutes or 10 minutes or even longer. And in the end, we see that the viewing time changes a lot according to the viewers. So we try to think about various navigation scenarios, which is a complex project for the production chain and for the script writing. That's how we developed our own production tools. We developed the Clint software that is displayed here down the stairs on a stand. And we've used this software till now in order to support authors, directors and cutters in order to use this new structure, this specific browsing condition, in order to build it in the production chain in a fluid and seamless way. We know that the economic volume is twice as 3 times lower than the one in TV, and yet we need specific and highly developed know-hows in order to work on this. So you mentioned very diverse options for the surfer. We see that Alexander's project is also involving various paths, and this is typical for digital writing. This is also typical for writing in video games. Everybody can play video game and have its own path. I will only move up to the 1st level, but my son will probably reach the 4th or 5th level. In the framework of the project you mentioned, or in the framework of other projects, have you had the opportunity to collaborate with people from the field of video game, and what were the lessons you could learn in terms of digital writing? At Epiphany, we've been working on both projects together with people from the video game field. On MDP, we had 2 game designers who helped us to bring a structure to the project, because game designer? How can you define this profile? A game designer is a person who's in charge of building in the recruitment mechanisms that are similar to playful mechanisms and that enable us to build the interaction in order to go ahead in the plot and to bring the story further. This is related to threshold, positioning yourself in the story, evolving together with the story, transforming a character's perspective. And I think with game design, we can then introduce rules and codes that are typical for video game.
What was interesting for me in video games is that screenwriters for video games know how to write a storyteller with several middles, several beginnings, and that, I think, is a particular skill. It's difficult to do when you're used to writing on linear stories or vertical stories, which have a beginning, a middle, and an end, with a set duration. Whereas in video games, you can play you can play a game which is pretty much endless. That leads me on to the other question that I had, talking about what digital storytelling is all about. You employed the word linear. In interaction with the audience, the story is built as you go along, and you have a personalized design. So we are no longer on the linear pattern as such. Well, first of all, do you agree with that interpretation of things? And is it something that storytelling not adapted to digital storytelling? And well, I asked some of these questions before. This is why some of our panelists are rather surprised about the question, because they didn't know about this one. I think there is some content that is more suitable to non-linear storytelling. For example, at ARTE, everything to do with knowledge and discovery, which is something that very much you find on screen. But we haven't yet found a way of adapting that to our web content. It's difficult to have non-linear content to provoke a discussion, and I don't know, it's more complicated to do something about volcanoes. And apart from the fact that people will be able to say, yes, okay, the Icelandic volcano basically messed up my last holiday, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about that point. But I think more than anything else, there is a lack of suitability for non-linearity, because at the end of the day, you just want to learn something. You don't want to have to click through and comment on certain content because if you've learned about something 1 minute, you don't want to comment on it the next. And I think there are some fields where it's more difficult to work than others, like fiction. Fiction and videos, games work very well. It's been working for many years, and most of our best screenwriters work in that field. But I think to create a simple web fiction and broadcasting that on the web is actually more difficult, because when you have a piece of fiction, you want to follow it, you want to create a bit of suspense and tension, and that is not something that's innate to the web. It's possible, but it's not natural. It doesn't come naturally to a web medium.
I'm sorry, I was listening to the translation, so it takes me longer to answer. For us with Sophia's Diary, it was quite easy to write the story, because we had a main story that we wanted to tell, and then we opened some episodes to the audience for them to be able to help us build the story. So, of course, in the long term, at the end, when we finished like the first book, all the stories in there were written taking into account all the emails we got, all the suggestions, all the voting that came for Sophia's Diary. So.
Alors, on peut peut-être passer à la deuxième partie qui est plus sur...
We can now move on to the second part that is rather related to the difficulties you can meet when creating or directing a digital storytelling project. Marta, reacting to Sophie's Diary's project. And not Sophie's Choice, but Sophie's Diary. We can see that that was first of all a book, which enabled us to quite easily update the stories using the proposals on the internet. Then you said that it had become a video project, a TV project. How did you manage the feedback from the audience in order to update the story? Did it work properly? In France, we have something that's called Plus Belle la Vie. It's a series that incorporates the audience's reaction on time in short production cycles. But this is not a very common practice.
Diary was that, as I said, there was this main story that we were telling, and some variations of the story were open to discussion or for voting. So when we went to production on TV, we shot the main story with no interaction with the audience, and then we had small pieces of the story being open to interactivity and to public discussion. That's how you do it. Otherwise, it's going to raise your production costs to impossible amounts. So that's how we do it, and that's how you manage to have the audience participating in your content.
In terms of the trouble that you have in producing a digital storytelling, that was a point about production. Are there any other issues that you've come across which you've had to overcome in terms of skill sets, for example, which will be different from a classical project? Probably not budgetary problems, but other issues. So talk about your experience, practical experience. What has changed in terms or in relation to a classical media project, and what's more difficult to manage or not? In relation to fiction pieces, integrating interactivity in terms of storytelling, we make up cross-disciplinary teams with community coordinators and others. So, of course, you have to completely rethink the way you're structuring content, because there is a kind of a team approach to the story. The author, of course, is the overarching leader to the project, but has to delegate a little bit of its intellectual property to the other members of the team and trust the whole team to pull together a project. So I think that's the first difficulty. And these different skill sets, are they included from the outset in the project, or are they integrated? Well, it depends very much on budget that you have. And a writer can write a script and set out the rules for the scenario that he wants, and then we try and adapt according to the budget. And especially community coordinators or community managers who will be the conveyors, the vehicles, transport, conveying the content to the end users. The second problem that we face is that we are building content for the audience based on their feedback. So we have to update content based on comments, and so we try and incorporate their contribution. And for Fin Fondue, we've tried to do this as much as we could. So, for example, practically speaking, every week we had an editorial committee with Alexandre Jardin, Stéphana Jamiak from Orange, we had our 2 community managers from Happy Fannie, and every week there was a briefing on the feedback that had been received in relation to each character, and we tried to adapt then the content to end-user feedback. And basically the people become part and parcel of the story because they're mentioned. Does the writer then see the storyboard evolve as feedback arrives from the end user? Is this sometimes easy to accept by the writer, or are there still people who are very sort of protective over their story and not very open to the interactivity of the storytelling? The example that you quote saying Alexandre Jardin, in my view, he's quite, he's not old, but he's well-established a writer. I mean, I read his works when I was younger. Well, he has he's overflowing with enthusiasm, and he participated in this project on the basis that he was going to be learning something, rather than trying to impose his theoretical his theories on the digital world. And so there, I think that the work that we did with him was very open, and I think he had a lot of good feedback with the end users. And for him, it was an inspiring experience which he could build on in order to feed 7 months' worth of daily work, daily storytelling. For our part, every day we're confronted with a number of issues, problems. And generally speaking, I think that documentary production is already a difficult field. Today, the deadlines that we work with are very tight. The budgets are fairly limited, and channels, TV broadcasters want more and more programs with tighter and tighter schedules. So we have a genuine issue with time that is given to us. We do manage sometimes to have 18 months to try and develop, produce, and air a project, but it's really not enough for long feature documentaries, which is the kind of work that we like to do. Another issue that we are concentrating on today or looking into is internet user participation and how to incorporate that into our storyboard. So, for example, how authors can anticipate and think of new ways to make end users participate, which will contribute to content. Sometimes we mentioned the 1% of contribution. Now, it does mean that 1% of the target audience will contribute in some form or another. That can go from a remark to an actual media content contribution or a personal account. And this is of the greatest interest to us today. And it's the area for which we have the least experience. And we have another constraint, is that we have to anticipate things and make sure that once the program has been launched online, everything starts. So it means that you are in a relationship of confidence with the distributor partner, which is a very demanding relationship, because the partnership is there specifically or precisely to encourage participation. And you're going to be in front of a PC screen and then perhaps with an end user, a writer, the head of communication, the programmer, the producer, and it's, I think, this aspect of the work which is the most difficult for us to actually put into practice, because it requires time as of when you start broadcasting, because usually what happens is that you produce a program, it's delivered, and then, you know, we just send the bill and it's over. And they look after distribution and broadcasting. Now, of course, we want to participate in the life of the program after it's broadcast, but we're working with a structure which isn't yet adapted to this new way of working. So it's quite, I suppose, to be accepted, or that it takes a bit of time. Now, we talked about cross-disciplinary teams. You've talked about shorter deadlines and the relationship between producer, distributor, which is evolving, which is not so much a relationship in succession, but is more of a partnership. And I think that ARTE has a lot of experience in this field. But perhaps Arnaud isn't much of an example for this domain. But perhaps you could give us a little bit of feedback on your experience in ARTE. Indeed. Perhaps with other TV channels, there is less of a cross-cutting aspect in terms of production and management. Very well, we're quite fortunate in that we are small structure, so cross-cutting discussions, etc., is more natural to us. But then the center, the core of any problem is the relationship between the distributor and the producer. Now, I wouldn't say there's been any revolution. It's more of a gradual evolution, adaptation, because up until now it has been the central relationship, even with classic audiovisual productions from the outset. So what, in my view, is in relation to story writers, it's difficult sometimes to make them understand that we want a program that will attract interaction with the end user, with the web user. And so what's important for me is from the outside to state very clearly what we want. Is it going to be something that's interactive, or is it something that's going to be a delivered end product, and that's that? So I think that participation in such productions, the point or the value of such participation will depend on the kind of documentary, and participation sometimes is actually much less. It's 0.00% or whatever. You know, if you want some coverage from Havana, for example, you need to have a critical mass of content to be of any interest, and so it's kind of difficult sometimes to get contributions for certain subjects. In relation to the difficulties that you mentioned that we may meet in practice in terms of the type of team that we work with, there are skill sets that we have to develop on the distributor side. I think this is key to realize that this market is changing. If we want connected TV, if we want cross-transmedia, you need to have the team backing this up at the distributor, within the distributor, and producers as well. I don't think that you're a very good example of the French producer market. You're quite exceptional. There are an increasing number of producers. There are many people in the room today who have already got these skill sets, but on a real market, everybody who wants to take part in the cross-media, transmedia section has to have the right skill set to be able to do it. Just to take what you said a little further, I don't want to pass the buck on to distributors, and certainly not to ARTE, which has been one of the first to take an active role in this movement and be experimental in this kind of work. I think that the revolution is happening more in terms of who is the mediator in this market. And some web users watching a program, how is the role of mediator changing? Programs' audience themselves become mediator. They are mediator with their community of 200-300 friends on their social network, just as much as the author, the story writer, is going to play a role via their blog. And then, of course, you have the role played by the usual or incumbent distributors, etc. So this, I think, is where there is a lot of change. It's the way the content is distributed, it's the way it's publicized, and there is where the genuine change is. When you think, that's where I think we have to think about the distribution strategy. Distributors, publishers often mention the idea of meeting point, whereas on the internet it doesn't happen. You have to keep searching, and it can be at any time, anywhere. There is no sort of program guide, and I think that might be a difficulty. This leads me on to the third subject I wanted to raise with you. We talked about audiences and their participation in building a story. Well, how can we engage audiences today? You've also mentioned the audience that participates, more passive audiences. Do you target your work according to target audience? And does the target audience differ with media? So, for example, content on a mobile won't be the same as on other internet, because you talked about internet, but we didn't talk about whether it was a mobile internet, PC internet, etc. So what are your secrets? What is your marketing strategy in order to engage these various target audiences without giving any trade secrets away, obviously? Nobody wants to say anything now.
Again, with our experience with Sophia's Diary, what we tried to do was to study how teenagers work, their mind works, and we're talking about Portugal because it was our first experience. It was in the Portuguese market, and we had to learn how to speak like these teenagers and to adapt the information we wanted to give them for each media. For example, Sophia's Diary developed from a website to a book collection, a TV show, a radio show, a monthly article in a magazine. So all of these needed a special writing. It was different communicating with the teenagers. And then we had to learn what would be, for example, easier for them to watch on the mobile or on the internet. And we realized that, for example, Sophia's Diary was 5 minutes long on the internet. It was 10 minutes long on TV. It was 1.5 or 2 minutes on the mobile phone, the mobile episodes. So they don't spend the same time looking at the contents on the different media. So on TV they would spend more time because we took into account that it was at dinner time, so they would be sitting in front of the TV with the whole family, so it could be longer. But if it's on the web, their attention span would be much shorter, so up to 5 minutes would be okay. Even the article on the magazine couldn't be too long because they don't read it to the end. So it was kind of hard to get used to it, and we had to read a lot of teenage magazines to understand and to realize how it would work. But it's something that you have to do. You have to put yourself into the life of a teenager to adapt that to them.
C'est ça, c'est pour consultation ou visualisation, mais pour...
This was the consulting part, the visual part, but as far as the call for contributions were concerned, how could you attract the audience? How could you ask the people to come and to tell about the following story or the rest of the plot they would imagine?
If I understood your question, you want to know how could we communicate with them and their opinions in our
suggestions. How did you collect their contribution? What was the reward?
For example, they could meet Sophia in person. We organized like 5 parties throughout the time that the TV series was on TV, and it was amazing how many people wanted to go and meet Sophia. We would have someone at the office every week for 2 hours on Messenger, talking to the fans, pretending they were Sophia. So she was real. When the kids saw the actress on the street, they would go to her, and they knew she was an actress, but they go to her and say, "Hi, Sophia, I really wanted to meet you. I have this problem with my boyfriend. I have this problem with my friend." And the actress would go, "Okay, I'm just an actress, so I don't know how I can help you." But it was amazing to see how they believed those characters were true. So that's how you get them involved. You invite them. You make them part of the story, and then there's a point where they don't know if it's real or if it's fiction, and that's what you have to take advantage of, because that's where you're going to get them involved.
D'autres leçons sur la manière...
Other lessons learned from the way you can, in which you can engage the audience. This is a very interesting question and a very broad issue. We have several parameters. What is at stake? How can we give a social aspect to a content? How can we enable the people to enter the content and to take part in it? We need social visibility inside of the project, for example, on the Facebook systems, in order to find mechanisms to include or make the friends of your friends part of the story. And then there's the external visibility, which is rather related to the marketing and media side. How can you find elements that will pass on or relay the information, like web partnerships, remaining in line with the story? So it's about the issue of how to edit the story and how far it is possible to, in the end, keep a coherent line. We now work on a project entitled Bunta in Babylon that is being developed with Vincent Moon, and we've been working on this for 1 year. After 1 series of participatory documentary about gentrification, we invited a few people to take part in a collective work dealing with the way in which people live together or are increasingly isolated in our suburbs. The project in the beginning was about a collective writing piece. The idea was to really tackle the issue at the forefront of the issue, to draft the project with authors and directors that are interested in this topic and working on this topic, that are well versed in the topic and may have some social asset. The project, in order to ease the approach and to easier engage the surfers, was to lower the amount of mediations between those who produce the content and those who have to bring their contributions. And this happened via a direct link between content producers and the audience. The key element was the choice of distribution partners. We needed some distribution partners that had already an existing community of audience. As a distributor, as a TV distributor, broadcaster, I think we have to think in a different way. We need to start thinking that it is not only about a TV set in front of the living room that's viewed by 99% of the population. We are dealing with multi-platforms and the audience is highly fragmented. So nowadays we need a specific program. No serious marketing project would only be satisfied with ad banners. We need to explore the various existing market niche. And in this respect, social networks are very useful because they already have those niche markets and explore them. This is the reason why I think that broadcasters have to change their view. The producers are totally in favor of the program being viewed. But we think that the broadcast side has to play a transversal, a cross-cutting role on those programs in order to work on web production or mixed productions and bring more coherence in those projects. This means you need to well know the audience, be they teenagers or other audiences. You can look for them on the social networks, and you really need to look for them and to find them because they're not going to come on their own. Thank you very much. I'd like to comment on what you said, Arnaud. It is very interesting to see how the amount of mediation elements is lowering. We saw that sociologists remind us very often at Orange Lab and also in other companies, as you said, Alexander, mentioning social networks, and you also made this point, Séverine. People like to have a dialogue with the characters, but also with other people about the story. And those both dimensions add to each other, which means that you do not bring in your environment on only one website, but you also bring it onto the places where people discuss, like social networks and fan websites and other places. Let's move on to another topic, Internet. We mentioned the various media. We also know that Internet is an international media. How do you deal with the language issue? Do you have a bilingual writing? Because we know that the web content accepted in case of specific copyright protection, any content may be viewed all over the world. We'll start with an international person. Portugal and Brazil.
Brazil, although it's the same language, we have very different words, and some words may be very mean to Brazilian people. So, but we do have a Brazilian version of Sophia's Diary that started 2 years after we started in Portugal, and it was also produced by us. So that was not a problem. We had a screenwriter adapting all the contents, and so there was someone managing the website. So any questions and all the features that we had in the Portuguese version, we had in the Brazilian version, so it was not a problem. Regarding like French people or Spanish people or English people going to our website and trying to understand Sophia's Diary, we started out as a Portuguese production, so we chose the name taking into account that probably one day we could sell it to other markets, and Sophia is a universal name, so it would work well. But 3 years after we started, we sold the format to Sony Pictures and Television, and they have the world rights for the format. So this content only makes sense if it's local, if it's adapted into a new language or a new country. So because Sony produced it in the UK, all the scripts were rewritten to that reality. So they had the website in English. There's a Chinese version of Sophia's diary, so the website is in Chinese. I don't get a word of what they write there, so I don't know if Sophia is similar to the Portuguese Sophia or to the English one, but that was not a question at the beginning. So because there are a couple of versions of the same project, and as it makes more sense as a local project, we only sell the format and not the product itself. So there's always a local version for it.
Je pense que c'est effectivement de...
I think she summed it up in a very relevant way. These are all the pros and cons of the international status of the Internet. Internet is not only depending on a national public service that's financed by TV fees. We see now that on the one hand we've got a major difficulty. How can we survive on the market if we can only sell concepts and not only end products? I think that we need to be creative in order to manage this. And this shouldn't be a problem for many broadcasters and producers. Many of them are afraid because it is not an easy task to take a product that is adapted to Portuguese use and to then translate it into Chinese. I think it's more interesting to adapt a concept to another local reality. Nonetheless, the international nature of Internet leads to amazing opportunities. Nowadays, we have the opportunity via international joint productions to have 4 producers in 4 different countries, and each of them can access public fundings and support mechanisms. And this is a very much of a French approach. How can we monetize this? I think our projects are getting even more visionary because we have those structures enabling international joint productions, so that the end product is international also. It is not about adapting to each country, but really about dealing with a single product for all countries. I differentiate between 2 options. First of all, one concept originates from one country and then you sell the concept and you adapt it. Let's say it is a post-selling strategy that has to do with the conventional audiovisual strategies. On the other hand, you can have a joint production that is international from scratch and then is only obviously adapted to international content. We're not going to deal with Japanese fans of Hello Kitty all over the world. This is not going to be an interesting topic for the worldwide audience. You can broadcast it once, but you cannot engage the audience, the international audience, in such a project. Other comments on the international aspect? We are really starting with this experience, and international agreements are very scarce. There are maybe 10 of them at the most. We need joint production, co-production agreements. We probably have projects represented here that are joint productions, and this requires support from producers and distributors. I have other questions, but I can try to wake up all those people who sleep in the back of the room. And I now give the floor to the audience so that you have the opportunity to ask questions. Thank you very much for your question. You were talking about transmedia, cross-media writing and storytelling. We know that it's not possible to vary a production from one media to the other one, but that you need to adapt the storytelling. Given your experiences and the various media you had to use, how could you qualify the various typical ways of writing according to the specific media. Yes, there are many issues related to this question. You cannot write a Twitter episode as you do for a Facebook page. So you need to really think about the pace. There is no code, there is no grammar, there is no specific fiction grammar. We're still experimenting. We have to try and to see what works or not, according to the audience's feedback. I can add to that that Transmedia Lab had the opportunity to see that sometimes long-lasting content are also working, although we tend to think that it's difficult to captivate the audience's attention. Surprisingly enough, we see that long contents have a high audience rate on mobile. Second, we make a clear difference between PC internet and mobile internet, and that's what we say and we recommend when we comment on projects. Internet is really a personal object, mobile is really a personal a device. If you forget your mobile at home, then you come back to pick it up. If you want to, if somebody wants to convey to you some information, they would send you an email. But if they want to reach you instantaneously, they will then use the mobile phone. So the uses are mixed, and it is possible to use augmented reality. I think that PC and PC internet has been mentioned a lot, as you did, mentioning interactivity and participation. And there's less interaction on the mobile phone. The question is then to see what happens with connected TV. We have internet content in the broad meaning, but the media is rather a passive one with a collective use. So shall we adapt the content and have a PC version and a TV version, connected TV version?
Bonjour, une question pour Alexandre. Enfin, deux questions en une.
Two questions for Alexandra. You talked about enriched web programs. You talked about web docs. You talked about the Addict series. Is there an example in France or elsewhere of a kind of program that was broadcast over the web over a longer term that has led to classic documentaries? Or, well, is there a possibility to go from one to the other, basically, or are they completely separate? Are you talking about a recurring format that existed on the web and then was adapted to the TV? You're not talking about a one-shot on the web which then was turned into a TV documentary. Well, what is the life longevity of a web doc? Well, web documentaries, they can remain online for ever so long as rights and licenses are renewed, but for community management and to gather together an active audience, I mean, we're talking about the battle to get loyalty, I would say between 2 and 4 months. Less than 2 months. The web is an instantaneous tool, but really to communicate properly on a topic, you need to work for at least 2 months. And with Prison Valley, which was depended entirely on the surrounding community activity, because the community divided when they decided to end consumption, and there were peaks of activity at the launch day. After 1 month, and then at the end of about 3 months, there was a kind of tail off of activity. I don't think it would be worth having a web doc 4 months before a TV launch, because then you're going to have a tail off when you're going to start advertising on TV. However, what I don't know about is whether these two audiences are compatible, because I think they're actually quite different target audiences. And so connected TV is not going to be a distribution or broadcasting problem, but an enrichment or enhanced TV viewing experience rather than attracting younger viewers back to TV. So what was the first question you asked about the repetitive format? Well, no, the idea was basically about an example that you could give us of a target audience that was created via the internet and then was transposed to the TV. Well, perhaps not so much documentary, but fictional pieces. There's one called Malviviendo, which is a Spanish format, which is about unemployment in Spain. This is about youth unemployment in Spain, which obviously is a subject that is close to the heart of the people. And we began publishing it on YouTube in Spain in September, and in December we had about 27 million views. And they are currently moving on to the production of a TV program with I think that given this massive internet audience, it may lead to a success on TV. But for effective advertising and to attract the audience, we're talking about views per month, whereas on TV you're talking about millions per day. So you need to have there's more influence of a TV program than internet. On ARTE we had a 20 show, which then was turned into a documentary. I think that to begin with it wasn't meant to be a documentary about TV. Well, in that case, yes. Well, we had 20 show, which in 2008 encouraged people to participate in order to appear on TV. You can imagine that at ARTE, the problem is that if I make comments, then my comments are going to be reread by somebody with 7 university degrees and a doctorate or whatever. So it's difficult to make people or encourage people to participate in this studio, and it was a complete flop. We only had about 40 participants over a whole month. And Prison Valley, which then became TV programs, that wasn't planned into the original model. We have another Facebook-based fiction piece, which could perhaps lead to something on TV. But for the moment, the strategy is only internet and only Facebook. So we'll see what that evolves into at a later stage.
Il y a aussi, c'est notre histoire sur France 5 de...
We also have a story on France 5, which is going to be published on internet. It's based on a documentary which talks about the Platini, the Mitterrand years, and people are being called upon to send in their personal contributions. I wanted to come back to the ADDICT program. I think that it's a really interesting case study. From my view, I'm rather critical towards it. I know it's easier to criticize than to produce, but personally speaking, I felt that all the augmented reality game writing was masked or veiled by poor standard storytelling or story writing. Doesn't this speak volumes about classical storytelling and having good characters, good writing as a foundation? I agree with you, and it's a criticism I often hear that I agree with, and I think it tells us a lot about how we produce fiction destined for internet. And the fact that you have a web documentary for 20 million, or for web fiction for 1.5 million, which was the case of ADDICT, which suffered from under budget. I think you have to also look at the business model that supports such work. ARG, we did invest in time, but unfortunately it was hampered by rather unfortunate writing afterwards. And I agree, there was a fundamental underfunding problem at the production stage. I think, therefore, that we do need to have a broader approach to this kind of thing, and we're not going to have 5 or 6 web fictions per year, because I don't think that all the state funding in the world wouldn't suffice to finance that. Now, the story writer who wrote the classic part, Vincent Vallée, I don't think it is his fault. It's just the fact that we just didn't have the funds to give it the proper financing. I have a provocative question. You referred briefly to video games tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. on how video games can help us understand the digital world. So it ties in what you say. And there is no author remuneration or royalties for video game writers. Do you think that we will, in transmedia projects, end up in the same situation where there'll be no specific authors, but people who work on the creative side without being considered authors? That's quite a complicated issue to discuss in France. I think what we will have are creative pools, and I think that it is a vital criterion to such a project. Well, if you're part of a creative pool, are you an author? Because we had Pascal Regard from the CACT who gives an interesting presentation about authors' rights and copyright, etc. in France, which is good. But what's happening in the modern world on the internet? Well, it's a very complex issue. When you have a community issue and rights and responds as characters, they become a co-author. So either everybody is a co-author or nobody. So how do you manage that on a practical basis? For the moment, we don't consider community managers as being authors, as being co-authors. Amélie Sudreau. I'm currently writing my thesis on creative screenwriting. I would like to know what kind of budget you work with for Supernatural Oddities. And a question aimed at all of you. We saw that it was more expensive to produce and that you had to adjust production teams. I would like to know how you make a profit out of all that you do. Well, you missed the business model session this morning, and I wouldn't want to repeat what was very well said this morning. Well, and tomorrow we have advertising and microfinancing to finance digital writing. Okay, for Supernatural Oddities, we had 200,000 euros that was half financed by 50-50 financed by CNC and Orange. We had a TV series, a web platform out of that. We coordinated for 4 months a little community on Facebook, so it was a tiny, tiny budget. In terms of business model, everything is still on the drawing board. It was a bit of a pilot test, especially for Orange. I don't want to speak in their name, but it was a little bit of a test to see what would be the pay point where the user starts paying for certain aspects of content. So, for example, do they have to have a subscription to a pay-per-view or a pay TV in order to continue participating, etc.? So I think it's still up in the air. There's no answer to that yet. Last week I had a very excellent presentation from Guillaume Blanchet from CNC, and I would say that we are not the best country in terms of project production. Now, and that includes transmedia. In terms of presenting projects to distributors, we had 2 approaches. First of all, saying that it was a revolutionary concept for the screen, but of course that's more expensive because then you have to have new imaging for that kind of medium. You have adapted story writing to take into account interactivity, or you can say it's a TV project or a cinema project. But basically, you need to have a cross-media marketing program. So to have something for web PC or web mobile in order to optimize target audiences in front of the TV screen or the cinema screen, I think there's basically a double approach. I'm not quite sure what you think of that. In our case, we don't usually get involved in this kind of work with a view to making a profit. It's not our primary objective, and it's not the primary objective of our authors, our writers either, and I don't think it's the primary objective of the distributors with whom we work either, in particular for the program that I'm involved in. Now, we have, in some cases, had good support, which means that it's possible today to fund certain projects that won't necessarily have been broadcast on classic media. And there are some projects, indeed, that are only broadcast on internet. So it's always quite a complicated setup, but it is possible to execute it, to carry it to the end. And I think that the model that we use isn't very different from a fiction piece or a documentary. Then there's the issue of micropayment, which is a method that is used by some producers in order to launch their work. There's also the issue or the possibility of subscription, such as iPad or other platforms, which make it possible to have interactive pay use, which is very difficult to accomplish via internet over PC. And then everything which is paper content, which is a different world of production, which may be of interest, but for the moment has nothing to do with the authoring and writing work that we're involved in at the moment.
For Sophia's Diary, we got the money from the sales of the books. We got a percentage from the publisher. We got sponsors for the TV show. The TV channel bought the TV series, so they paid for it. But apart from that, we got sponsors, so we got extra money for it. And we also got money from the text message that people sent to vote on the dilemmas. We got a percentage of that too. So, and the books are still selling, so we still get some money from that.
Juste, je peux me permettre une remarque, c'est marrant, tu disais que le brin de content...
You said that web content wasn't really a writer's work, but when we see Rien Satouf, which is something that is, it's not branded content, but it's all financed by BNP Paribas, the bank. Is that part of the same business, or is it something else? Okay, brand content, I think, is different if you're talking about documentary or fictional content. I think it's a different case. Is that something that you want to talk about tomorrow? Yes, Nicolas Devant from the bank BNP Paribas will be here tomorrow, and I think that you saw on the internet my Micoloc, which is a series, online series, which was a huge success and produced, written by Rien Satouf, which now will be produced as a series on Canal and is even going to be turned into a feature film by BeActive, produced by BeActive. And this today is a project that is financed and supported by BNP Paribas. So in terms of brand content, they are helping this project develop. As a bank, they're financing the development of this project, and they'll be here tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. for the last session of the conference. Now, it's quite interesting to see this approach starting via internet as on an experimental basis in order to test use and see how technologies tie into internet. There is no set model for the moment, so it is worth, I think, experimenting with different products without jeopardizing the quality of the story. Obviously, you can't treat web users as simpletons, and then creating a brand around the content, which will then obviously generate bigger audience impact. Another project that I mentioned this morning, iMedia, which is being launched today, which is on networks and their influence, which is freemium content, i.e. the majority of content is free over internet. And then there is a part of content which is accessible via micropayment, and you can buy extra content as well as a book, very much on the Sophia's Diary model. And I think that in September we'll have this publication on the influence of social networks in France. Now, I don't know exactly how it works because it's being launched today, but it should be interesting to see how it pans out as a documentary over the internet. And the leader of that project will be here tomorrow as well to talk about it. Just a word to wrap up, if you want me to. The question was, digital story writing, is it a revolution or something on those lines? I don't know if it's really a revolution, but we've had a look at a number of changing aspects. It's certainly a maelstrom at the moment, and there's a lot of tension. We've talked a lot about interactivity, building your own story. We've talked about cross-disciplinary teams. We've talked about relations with brand owners, with target audience, and the international aspect of things. So all of this creates a whole host of facets. And I think that the successful combination is, if there is a secret recipe to success, I think that there isn't one yet. We are still at the innovative stage, and cinema, like in cinema, there is evolution. We had the talkies, and then color, and not so much. We're seeing change not in terms of new technology, but in terms of new story writing and new business models. Thank you very much to all our panelists and to our debate host, the host of this debate. I suggest we have a coffee break and back here in 30 minutes for the pitches to be presented here. 11 projects are going to be